The mafia's power and influence on the street was unrivaled, and in the 1970s that power and influence permeated prison walls, especially at Green Haven Correctional Facility. Prisoners with organized crime connection and cash could buy the biggest favors. The State of New York Commission of Investigation uncovered ongoing rampant corruption within the New York State prison system. According to this report, corruption and abuses in the correctional system, the Green Haven Correctional Facility. A list of men alleged to be powerful mobsters within the New York Mafia were afforded special treatment at Green Haven. In exchange for things like cash, color TVs, microwaves, watches, and event tickets, guards would let the inmates partake in a slew of illegal and illicit activities behind and beyond prison walls. So who were these mob-connected men? And how were they able to receive special treatment at Green Haven Prison? Let's find out. I'm your host, Tony Handsome, and this is Corruption Connection. First up, the most notable mobster on the list of inmates receiving special favors at Green Haven was John Gotti. The future boss of the Gambino crime family would serve time at Green Haven in 1974, and it was reported that he corrupted guards to leave prison on 3 different occasions. I've done a separate episode detailing John Gotti's full report and his involvement in the corruption at Green Haven titled, John Gotti Bribes His Way Out of Prison. I will post a link for this video in the description section below. Next up on the list is Edward Fanelli Jr. Fanelli Jr. was a Colombo mobster holding the position of soldier in the crime family. The report states, Edward Fanelli Jr., identified as a soldier in the Colombo crime family, entered the correctional system on December 15, 1961, upon conviction of murder in the 2nd degree, assault in the 1st degree, and assault in the 2nd degree. Fanelli was sentenced to 20 years to life, 5 to 10 years, and 2 1/2 to 5 years respectively, to be served concurrently. On December 1st, 1976, he was paroled to live with Frank and Faye Leto. After a federal counterfeiting conviction, he absconded before sentencing in April 1980, and is currently a fugitive from justice. On May 26, 1976, at approximately 7:40 a.m., escorted by officers Roger McGibney and Frederick Miles, Fanelli left Green Haven in an unmarked state vehicle to visit his sick and dying sister in Goldwater Memorial Hospital on Roosevelt Island. On the way, the officers stopped in Queens to allow Fanelli to purchase flowers. At the hospital, they were met by Fanelli's friends and constant visitors, Frank and Faye Leto, who had been advised in advance of his scheduled visit. The Leto's presence did not bother the officers because of their frequent visits to the prison and their friendships they had developed with the guards at Green Haven. After the visit, Fanelli and the 2 officers and the Letos stopped at Frank Leto's liquor store, Party Time Liquors in Brooklyn. They all ate together at a Chinese restaurant and then proceeded to the Leto's home in Queens. Fanelli and Faye Leto drove off in the Leto's car. The 2 officers and Frank Leto headed for Manhattan in the state car. The officers parked the state car at the parking meter on 2nd Avenue near 12th Street and walked around the corner. Leto, McGibney, and Miles entered an apartment in the building on 12th Street, which serves as a house of prostitution. When the 3 men returned to the state car, they discovered that it had received a traffic summons for parking at an expired meter. Officer Miles later attempted to have the summons squashed. On June 2nd, 1976, he wrote to the New York City Parking Violations Bureau, PVB, inferring that the summons had been received while at a sick visit. Miles' letter stated, 2 correctional officers had an inmate from Green Haven on a sick visit. For security reasons, both officers had to remain with the inmate at all times, therefore making it impossible to check the meter until such time as they were ready to leave. At that time, the summons had already been written. PVB returned Miles' letter to the DOC's New York office. The explanation of the circumstances surrounding the receipt of the summons, later filed with the PVD by DOC's New York office, states that, while on official department business involving transporting an inmate from Green Haven Correctional Facility on a sick visit, the officers had to leave the car unattended and the meter expired in the interim. The location of the receipt of the summons, however, is at some distance from and off the route of the trip. The officers returned in the state car to the Leto's home to meet Fay Leto and Fanelli and noticed that the Leto's car had been in a minor accident. Edward Fanelli and the officers returned to Green Haven at about 11:15 p.m., approximately 12 hours after they had left. A short time after the visit to the hospital, Fanelli's sister died. On June 5, 1976, officers Robert, Klaus, and Miles accompanied Fanelli to his sister's funeral. The funeral was at Romanelli Funeral Home on Rockaway Boulevard in Queens. But the officers first proceeded to the home of Frank and Fay Leto. The officers left Fanelli with the Letos, agreeing to meet them later at the funeral home. Frank Leto gave the two officers approximately $200 and made arrangements for them to have sex at a house of prostitution on Manhattan's West Side, near 21st Street. Several hours later, the officers met Fanelli and the Letos at the funeral home, and together they went to an Italian restaurant in Queens. After eating, Fanelli returned to Dutchess County with the two officers who brought him into St. Francis Hospital in Poughkeepsie, New York. The officers, who had left Green Haven at approximately 6:30 a.m., returned to the facility at about 9:30 p.m., 15 hours later. On another occasion, Fanelli was escorted on a medical visit for treatment relative to injury sustained in a dispute with another inmate. A stop was made at the home of an escorting officer where, on arrival, Fanelli's handcuffs were removed and he changed into street clothing. Dressed as civilians, the three men returned to the unmarked state car and proceeded to the doctor's office. Fanelli remained unhandcuffed. Fanelli was warmly greeted at the doctor's office by Frank and Fay Leto, who knew of the trip in advance. The doctors left Fanelli with the Letos in the doctor's office and waited outside in the hallway, occasionally re-entering the office to see if Fanelli was ready to leave. One of the officers went out for about a half an hour and brought back coffee for his colleagues and the others. After the doctor completed his treatment, Fanelli and the officers and the Letos went to a nearby restaurant. They enjoyed a lengthy dinner, including liquor and wine, seated at a large center table in a well-appointed restaurant. Then, on Fanelli's invitation, they proceeded to the Letos, ostensibly to show the officers to the house. After a short stop, the Letos and Fanelli, with the officers traveling separately in a state car, drove halfway to Green Haven. Stopping at a roadside rest area, Fanelli returned to the state car and rode with the officers to Green Haven. Prior to re-entering the facility, all three changed back to their uniform and state-issued clothing. The prison guard's records show conflicting times for the length of the trip, the most plausible being 9.5 hours. Next on the list is Rocky Evangelista. Rocky hailed from the Long Island City section of Queens and was a part of the famed heroin importation scheme known as the French Connection, where mafia-connected drug traffickers smuggled millions of dollars of heroin from Turkey through France and distributed all across the United States and Canada during the 1960s and 70s. Evangelista's rise to gangster infamy came in 1972, when Rocco, along with other top drug men in the mafia, utilized corrupt New York City police officers to steal 388 pounds of narcotics from the NYPD property clerk office in Lower Manhattan. The report states, "Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this video, please click the like button below and make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you would like to support the channel further, please hit the super thanks icon, which can be found below each video or in the comment section below. If anyone is interested in becoming a connected member, click the join button to gain access to rare pictures of organized crime figures, untold stories, and exclusive behind the scenes footage. Thank you. Now let's get back to Corruption Connection. Rocco Evangelista. In February 1975, Rocco Evangelista refused to answer questions put to him by a special grand jury investigating the disappearance of 388 pounds of heroin and cocaine from the property clerk's office of the New York City Police Department, the French Connection case. Found guilty of criminal contempt, he received a sentence of 4 years. On June 15, 1976, Evangelista was transferred to Green Haven. After serving his full sentence, he was released from Green Haven on January 25, 1980. On August 11, 1976, Evangelista left Green Haven at approximately 8:30 a.m. accompanied by officers Klaus and McGibney to attend the funeral of his 7-year-old son at the Montero Funeral Home in Long Island City, Queens. Arriving in New York City around lunchtime, the three men first stopped at an Italian restaurant owned by Evangelista's friend in Long Island City. At the funeral home, arrangements were made with Green Haven for the trip to be extended. The officers, with time to spare, were given sealed envelopes by another of Evangelista's friends and directed to a prostitute in Manhattan. The envelope, still sealed, was left with the prostitute. Returning to the funeral home, the officers retrieved Evangelista, who announced his desire to secure the services of a prostitute. The three men went off to Manhattan. This side trip, however, was a wasted one. The officers were nervous and the hour was late, so they returned to Green Haven without satisfying Evangelista's desires. The time of their arrival is confused by contradictory records, but it was at least 7:30 p.m. and perhaps as late as 10:50 p.m., 11 to over 14 hours after they left Green Haven. For their trouble, the officers received in excess of $200. Next on the list is Arnold Squitieri, a.k.a. Zeke, Fat Arnie, or Arnie the Animal, was a Gambino mobster who would eventually rise to the top position of boss in the crime family. However, back in the 1970s, before becoming a made man in the family, Squitieri was a notorious large-scale drug trafficker. He would receive a 6-year sentence for manslaughter and entered the prison system on June 25, 1975. The report states, Arnold, Arnie the Animal, Fat Arnie Squitieri, has a varied criminal history including narcotics, weapons, grand larceny, and forgery charges, and is a member of the so-called Purple Gang. Squitieri was convicted of manslaughter in the first degree and sentenced to a term of 8 years. He entered the prison system on June 25, 1975. On August 14, 1975, his sentence was reduced to 6 years. Squitieri was paroled to the custody of authorities in his home state of New Jersey on May 9, 1979. While in prison, his approved visitors included known organized crime figures. On April 12, 1976, at about 1 p.m., Squitieri, accompanied by 2 officers, left Green Haven to go to a doctor's appointment in the Bronx. On the way, the group detoured to Squitieri's New Jersey residence. The officers found it impressive. The officers then followed Squitieri and his wife to the doctor's office, where they were met by some of Squitieri's associates. After seeing the doctor, Squitieri and his wife went to a hotel in the Bronx while the officers waited elsewhere. A little over an hour later, Squitieri rejoined the officers, and after dinner at an Italian restaurant, they returned to Green Haven at about 10 p.m. The 2 officers were paid over $300. The next day, on another trip to the doctor, Squitieri left Green Haven at 8:30 a.m., accompanied by officers McGibney and Miles. The officers left Squitieri alone at the doctor and proceeded to an arranged and paid-for meeting with the prostitute. Afterwards, they retrieved Squitieri and returned to Green Haven approximately 12 hours later, first stopping for dinner at Squitieri's favorite Italian restaurant. On August 16, 1976, at approximately 8:20 a.m., Squitieri again left Green Haven, this time scheduled to go to Pelham Bay General Hospital in the Bronx, accompanied by officers McGibney and Kloss. Squitieri, however, had arranged for the officers to go first to his home in New Jersey so he could meet his wife. Upon arriving at Squitieri's home, the officers had a drink and were given several $100s by Squitieri. Squitieri also offered the 2 officers various gifts for themselves as well for the Green Haven superintendent. While at his home, Squitieri called to check with his attorney, the late Gino Galena, regarding the arraignment for his admission. There were problems, and Mr. Galena was not there. Squitieri and his wife set out for the hospital in one car, followed by the 2 officers in another car. At the hospital, they were met by Galena and a notorious criminal associate of Squitieri's. The hospital administrator refused Squitieri's admittance, and he became enraged, venting his anger, in particular at Galena. Galena was visibly shaken and walked away from the others. Squitieri told his associate to contact a certain government official who might assist him. While they waited, pizza was delivered. An hour later, Squitieri entered the hospital and was admitted. The officers left Squitieri at the hospital and proceeded to a motel to meet a prostitute.